Breaking news tonight, U.S. forces have launched military strikes against Iranian-backed militant targets in the Middle East. It is the operation we've been expecting in response to a deadly attack on American troops in the region. The U.S. Central Command says the strikes happened in Iraq and Syria, and more than 85 targets were hit with numerous aircrafts, including long-range bombers flown from the United States. According to the Iraqi military, a city was targeted that is along the Syrian border there in Iraq. And according to Syria state TV, a power station was also targeted that led to a partial power outage. U.S. military leaders spoke moments ago about these strikes, saying this is not over.
We feel really confident about the precision of those targets and the fact that those were strong military targets.
These responses began tonight, but they're not going to end tonight.
It's been 5 days since a drone attack killed 3 U.S. service members and injured several more at a base in Jordan. The U.S. has blamed Iran for all of that. Iran denies any sort of involvement. As we've been reporting all week, the Biden administration decided on a retaliation plan days ago, but kept the details of that plan close to the chest. Tonight, in a statement, President Biden said this, quote, "If you harm an American, we will respond," while the president of Iran is promising a response of his own.
جنگی رو آغاز نخواهیم کرد، اما اگر کشوری اگر نیروی ظالمی قلدری بخواد قلدری بکنه، جمهوری اسلامی ایران جواب او رو جواب محکمی خواهد داد.
NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv. So, Matt, break down where things stand right now and what we know right now. CENTCOM in the U.S., they're saying they went after what the U.S. describes as Iranian-backed militant groups, but they also are saying that some of these targets were directly related to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. What can you tell us?
That's right. I mean, we know that there's Iranian Revolutionary Guards who are spread out across the region, manning some of these groups, sort of partners with some of these so-called axis of resistance groups, particularly in the regions that were struck in Syria and Iraq. Now, we do know that there were 85 targets that were hit with 125 precision munitions. And one of the interesting things was, as you mentioned, that these were B-1 bombers flying all the way from America. That doesn't sound like they launched any attacks from U.S. military bases in the region, of which there are several. So this was kind of the long way around doing it. And as you mentioned, we heard from Lieutenant General Sims and others saying that this is not the end. Now, we knew that this wasn't going to be the end because they had already announced that this was going to be weeks and weeks of retaliation. But at the same time, what isn't clear is whether or not this is the end for this evening or whether or not we're going to continue to see more strikes as the evening goes on. Right now, sounds like we've just heard this one volley, again, quite a large attack, but it doesn't sound as though it's going to be continuing round after round this evening. We haven't heard of any additional strikes yet tonight, but it sounds like, as you've said, as the U.S. government has said, this is definitely not over. Allison?
Matt, do we have any sense of why now? Why this timing? I mean, the U.S. has talked about this for days now, 5 days since that attack on the base that killed 3 U.S. service members. But why tonight and why not that night? Do we know?
We don't really. I mean, it would take some time, of course, for the U.S. to come together and pull together their various targets to decide which places to strike. When you talk about timing, it sounds like this is almost going to be like a season of retaliation, weeks and weeks of strikes. So we are talking about a sprawled out timing that could last for a long time. So we really aren't talking about just this evening. This isn't one discrete attack. I will tell you the only other thing that I can think of off the top of my head in terms of the timing is that we already knew that Secretary Antony Blinken is going to be doing his rounds, his 5th trip, not just to Israel, but to the entire Middle East. And he's going to be visiting a lot of countries that are U.S. allies, like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. These are countries that are very much in support of the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people. But they have one more enemy more than Israel, and that is Iran. So the timing is excellent to start these strikes right before Antony Blinken does his rounds for these Sunni Islamic states, many of which are inimical to Iran, a Shiite state. They see Iran as their primary threat. this is the moment diplomatically where they could start this round of retaliation and still have a great opportunity for Antony Blinken to go from country to country and shore up support for the U.S. effort in the Middle East. Ellison, a lot of this is kind of part of a redrawing of alignments region-wide, and Antony Blinken is going to be a big part of that. And these military strikes are going to be part of that, too. Ellison.
Matt, have we heard anything tonight from Iraq or officials there in Syria?
We haven't really heard much from Syria except reports from Syrian state television. And, you know, the regime of Bashar al-Assad, they don't really come out and say a lot about this. It's you know, a regime that's on the back foot, as we've known for much of the past decade, because of all of the internal conflicts that have been raging in that country. But Iraq is a nation that is obviously a close partner to the United States, and they've already released statements protesting against these U.S. incursions, essentially saying, well, the only thing they can say, which is that this was a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. The U.S. has been violating Iraqi sovereignty for quite a while and has a lot of military assets parked in Iraq. So whether or not the Iraqis are going to make good on these protests, it seems as though this is them just saying, we wish we weren't involved in this conflict, but it's not as though they necessarily are going to have any military capabilities or any diplomatic heft to even make much of a protest against that. But yes, the Iraqis officially are angry that the U.S. has been attacking groups within their borders. Ellison.
All right, NBC News foreign correspondent in the Middle East there for us, Matt Bradley. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And joining me now is NBC News analyst and former deputy commander of the United States European Command, Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. Lieutenant General Twitty, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Let's start with just big picture. What is your reaction to both the nature of the strikes we've seen today in Iraq and Syria, and also the amount, more than 85?
Yeah, so let me just go back. You asked Matt an important question of why now. Mm-hmm. And the why now is because you have to set the conditions. And so you don't want to rush to failure with operations. This was a massive operation. We're talking about 85 targets and a lot of U.S. capability here. So you need to set the conditions. The weather conditions must be optimal to conduct attacks from the air, particularly for our bombers. We have to move capabilities to where we get the right angle of attack for many of our missiles, particularly on our ships. Have to move capability to ensure that our aircraft are not in harm's way. We have to put force protection measures in place for our troops on the ground that are around the Middle East. So all those conditions must be set. That way, when we conduct attacks like this, we reduce risk, not only risk on our troops, but risk on the mission itself. And so let me talk about the attack today. In the greater scheme of things, this attack was proportional. If you notice, it hit at the appropriate attacks commensurate with our troops that were killed. It went after the Islamic resistance in Iraq. It went out after Kataib, Hezbollah, that's in Iraq and Syria, and also the Quds force that trains, aids, and funds these forces. And so, although 85 targets, we did not see any targets go after the Houthis. No targets went after Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas or the jihadist front located in the West Bank. And so in the grand scheme of things, although a great operation, massive operation, it was proportional in nature. And oh, by the way, no attacks inside Iran.
Lieutenant General, we have been reporting here at NBC for days now since that initial drone strike that killed the U.S. service members, 3 of them in Jordan, that there was, and the U.S. has been talking about it very openly, right, that there was the possibility, the plans were in motion for there to be a strike. And days ago, we were reporting here that President Biden had decided what that strike would look like, but they weren't saying it publicly. On top of all of that, NBC News has reported that militants were able to evacuate their headquarters and move weapons during the last 5 days. Do you think these strikes are going to be effective? And I understand you're saying that there are a number of factors that go into when the decision is made to strike now. Did the U.S. maybe make any sort of mistake by saying we're going to do this so many days ago and then waiting to do it now?
So you got a couple of things there that I'll unpack. The first is when we conduct operations, we try and go after the capability. People are going to move around all the time. What is key is to go after capability that is being used to kill our soldiers and to strike our interests. And so going after the radar capability, going after the launch capability, going after the drone capability. And it is great that we also kill the militants, but what we want to do is have a sustained attack. And even though this attack was told out loud and told to the masses, we're still able to accomplish, in my view. We'll have to see what the battle damage assessment says. But in my view, we're probably able to accomplish a good bit of what we intended to accomplish with these strikes. But they will have to be sustained because these militants are hardened and they will come back after us. And so a sustained attack will be the key here.
And that is something that we expect to be happening based on what we have heard from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and others. Lieutenant General Steph Twitty, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and insight.
Thank you.
Hours before those retaliatory strikes, President Biden was on hand to witness the return of the bodies of those 3 U.S. service members killed in Jordan. The president and First Lady paid their respects at a dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. They were joined by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, as well as the soldiers' grieving families. 46-year-old Sergeant William Rivers, 24-year-old Sergeant Kennedy Sanders, and 23-year-old Sergeant Breonna Moffett all were killed at a U.S. outpost in Jordan last weekend in what the Pentagon has called a drone attack by an Iranian-backed militia. Both Sanders and Moffett were posthumously promoted to the rank of sergeant. An agreement is still being hammered out to release the remaining hostages being held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip and suspend Israel's military offensive. But NBC News has been given a rare look into the underground tunnels in southern Gaza, where some of the Israeli hostages were reportedly being kept. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez takes us there.
Beneath the city of Han Yunis in Gaza, Hamas tunnels and a darkness that feels like it may never end.
This tunnel just goes on and on and on.
Until you reach this, Israeli troops showing us what they called a Hamas dungeon. 5 cells with doors that lock from the outside and a single larger room.
You lose the sense of direction, the sense of time.
It was here Israeli troops found these drawings left behind by 5-year-old Emilia Eloni, who was kidnapped during the Hamas attacks and held here with her mother, Danielle.
The only sentence I could say, please God help us, please God help us.
She told us how on October 7th they desperately ran into this safe room. Hamas terrorists were outside, setting the house on fire.
I covered my daughter. I don't know why, because of course it didn't help. And I told her, I'm sorry, my love, but we are going to die here.
Their awful choice. Better to go out and be shot than suffocate inside.
We opened the window, and I'm waiting for get killed.
Instead, they were taken to Gaza and marched barefoot into the tunnels.
I was in this tunnel for 1 hour, and it was hot and it was hard to breathe. What was it like to be there for 36 days?
Horror. Suffering every minute.
Every day, a battle to keep her daughter's hope alive.
We told stories. We played with mattresses like it's a tent and we are hiding in the tent.
Danielle appearing in this hostage video, her family's only way of knowing she was alive. They were eventually released in November. Today, Amelia is back in kindergarten.
Is she still the same little girl she was before October 7th?
No. If she can see me, she's screaming, "Mom, Mom, where are you?" She will never be the same kid she was.
Something forever lost in the darkness of the tunnels. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
Don't go anywhere because we are just getting started. Closing arguments wrapped up today for Jennifer Crumbly, the first parent to go on trial for her son's deadly shooting rampage. We have those details. Plus, the district attorney in the Georgia case looking into former President Trump admits to a relationship with the special prosecutor. So what does it mean for the case? And an extensive investigation is questioning whether Mexico's president funded his first campaign with money from major cocaine traffickers. One of the journalists behind the report explains later this hour. That's all ahead, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. A former CIA engineer was sentenced to 40 years in prison. The feds say Joshua Schwartz was behind the largest theft of classified information in CIA history. He gave CIA hacking secrets to WikiLeaks back in 2017 before his arrest. He helped create hacking tools as a coder for the agency. Former football star and actor Carl Weathers died yesterday. Weathers was an NFL linebacker who later starred in the Rocky movies as well as Happy Gilmore. In a statement, his family said he died peacefully in his sleep. He was 76 years old. Tesla is recalling 2.2 million cars. That's nearly every Tesla on roads in the U.S. Federal regulators say the font size of certain warning lights on displays are too small. The problem, though, it will be fixed with an over-the-air software update, and Tesla owners will not have to bring their cars in for service. The U.S. economy added over 350,000 jobs last month, actually better than market projections. The Labor Department report found the unemployment rate is holding at 3.7%. It was all fueled by some pretty strong growth led by professional and business services. And the judge in President Trump's January 6 D.C. trial wiped away the start date. The federal election interference trial was supposed to start in early March. A D.C. Circuit Court is anticipating to decide whether or not Trump is immune from prosecution. It's not really clear right now when a new date might be set. The district attorney leading the federal interference probe against Donald Trump in Georgia is now fighting to stay on the case after admitting she had a personal relationship with one of her prosecutors. Today, in a 176-page response, Fulton County DA Fani Willis acknowledged her relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, but said it did not start until after her office hired him. Willis also denied allegations made by one of Trump's co-defendants that she benefited from that relationship financially. She claims she and Wade always split travel expenses, never shared financial accounts or a house, and they did not split day-to-day expenses. Former President Trump and some of his co-defendants are now calling for Willis to be removed from the investigation into his attempt to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. Willis called the accusations against her, quote, meritless, and said they don't compromise her ability to lead the case. The situation doesn't. NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Cinnadella joins me now with more. Okay, so Willis and Wade, they've been issued subpoenas on behalf of one of Trump's co-defendants, right? Michael Roman, who is calling on them to testify at a hearing by Fulton County Superior Court on February 15th. They're fighting those subpoenas. Do you expect that we will see them actually testify? I guess we'll start with that, and then we'll try to unpack the rest of this.
So totally up to the judge's discretion. A lot of things could happen here. The judge could actually decide prior to this hearing. The judge could also make one or both of them testify. The judge, if they do testify, will likely limit that testimony to very specific issues that he believes should be debated. So we will see.
So what is the standard? I guess, is there a standard of behavior when it comes to a situation like this? I mean, you think of big corporations like this one, and there are policies for if you have a relationship or you're dating someone that you happen to work with, a reporting process. How does it go when you are the DA and you're kind of in charge. I don't know.
Yes, there is a real legal standard about when a prosecutor is involved in a conflict of interest. And because that could compromise a defendant's right to a fair trial, it is important to investigate that. Now, the standard here for a conflict of interest would be if the prosecutor has a personal interest in the conviction of the defendant. So obviously there's financial, there's also romantic. So financially, usually it's like if they get a bribe or a kickback or really will get some money directly from putting that defendant in jail. Now, romantically, though, that's really the big question. Many people date each other. Many people have relationships. It is unclear how that standard will play out in front of this judge.
And is that a standard that would be state level, or is that just bigger bar association legal practice?
All the above, but the judge would be going by the state of Georgia. But really, the judge has discretion here to decide what he thinks is appropriate or will impede this trial.
Okay, and Willis is also facing a subpoena from the House Judiciary Committee. The chairman, Jim Jordan, he is demanding documents from her office related to accusations about federal grant money that was allegedly misused. Again, this is all related to this election interference probe. Willis says that all of this, they are attempts to obstruct her investigation into Trump. What is she up against there? And is this other situation going to be a factor when it comes to her dealings with the committee or politicians on Capitol Hill?
Well, it seems like this precise subpoena is a little bit different, but they can all be wrapped up together. Again, now at the discretion of Congress, so it depends on what they really ask from her. But the possibility here is actually more dangerous for Willis because she could then enter territory to get criminally prosecuted if she really did misuse federal funds for state purposes. But that said, the bar is high. It is unlikely. We are only hearing so far an allegation just from one person who had a wrongful termination lawsuit against the DA's office. So it's not clear how much meat there is to this claim.
And what is your general read on this back and forth about the relationship between Fani Willis and Nathan Wade? I mean, are we watching a situation that from the legal perspective is more politics than it is legal, or is there really a legal issue here from what we know right now?
You know, Ellison, I do think it's more political than it is legal, but unfortunately with these subpoenas, affidavits, things taken under oath. If it turns out that one party really lied in this, so Wade has an affidavit here that says this is everything I did, and she's claiming that she paid 50% of everything or roughly, and so they're claiming all of these things to be true. If Trump's team, who claims that they have evidence that rebuts all of this, if Trump's team at this hearing really shows that they are lying, I mean, that is problematic for the whole case. So are they lying? Are they not? When did this affair start? Who knows?
We will hopefully find all of that out soon. Angela Snedella, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here, as always. Closing arguments wrapped up today in a historic trial against the mother of the Oxford High School shooter. The Michigan manslaughter trial is a novel attempt to determine whether or not parents should be held criminally responsible for the actions of children who commit school shootings. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has more.
Tonight, Jennifer Crumbley's fate will soon be in the hands of a jury after closing arguments in her involuntary manslaughter trial honed in on whether the 45-year-old Michigan mom broke the law by failing to stop her son from killing 4 classmates at Oxford High School.
The shooter learned how to shoot and was given the murder weapon by his parents.
No one could have expected this, including Mrs. Crumbley.
Prosecutors suggesting Crumbley ignored red flags.
He was struggling. He was hallucinating. He was seeing things. She did not give him the help that he wanted.
The defense hitting back.
Trained professionals told Mrs. Crumbley her son was not a risk.
9 days of testimony culminating with Crumbley, the defense's only witness. She was cross-examined by prosecutors today.
And you don't deny that you never once took him to see a therapist or counselor?
No, I did not.
Prosecutors also pushing back on Crumbley's earlier testimony that her husband, James, who's set to be tried in March, was responsible for securing Ethan's gun.
Well, you didn't trust him to get out of bed on time.
Correct.
But this is the person you entrusted with a deadly weapon.
I did.
The defense making one final plea.
I am asking that you find Jennifer Crumbley not guilty, not just for Jennifer Crumbley, but for every mother who's out there doing the best they can, who could easily be in her shoes.
Jurors on Monday will begin deliberating an unprecedented question. At what point is a parent legally required to stop their child from committing a mass shooting? Back to you.
Maggie Vespa, thank you. Coming up, millions across California are bracing for another one of those atmospheric river storms. We'll have more on that. But first, you've got to see this. Six of Michael Jordan's signed NBA championship Air Jordan sneakers sold today for a cool $8 million in a Sotheby's auction. I'll tell you who did not buy it, me. Breaking the record there for the most expensive game-worn sneakers ever sold off. The set of 6 shoes is known as the Dynasty Collection. Each pair worn during championship games from 1991 to 1998. $8 million is a hefty price to pay to try to be like Mike, but there was a movie about it. It might work. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following. At least 19 mayors from the African American Mayors Association will be gathering in Los Angeles this week. They'll be meeting with LA Mayor Karen Bass to address critical issues in their respective cities, things like affordable housing, homelessness, and how to make cities safer. Seattle police have arrested 2 teens for a hit-and-run assault using stolen cars. They're accusing a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl of intentionally hitting multiple people in November. Videos shared by Seattle police show the incidents caught on camera. In one video, passengers in the stolen vehicle can be heard encouraging the driver to hit a pedestrian, and they also seem to be laughing after the crash. And finally, Alaska has plunged into a deep freeze, and it is seeing some of its coldest temperatures in years. A major Anchorage airport was 18 degrees below zero on Wednesday, marking the coldest day in 15 years. More than 100 inches of snow has fallen, the earliest time Alaska's biggest city has ever hit that mark. It's been so cold that some areas in the state have seen heating fuel thicken and roofs collapse because of the weight of snow. All right, if one storm was not bad enough, millions across California, they are bracing for another potentially worse storm this weekend. It's the same type of storm as the first one, known as atmospheric rivers, which are essentially large river systems in the sky that carry a lot of moisture from the tropics onto land. The National Weather Service warns significant to extreme rainfall is expected, particularly in Southern California. It's not quite what people there want to hear, considering all of the flooding they saw yesterday from that first storm. Now, with another one in the mix, this could lead to potentially life-threatening conditions, things like flash floods, landslides, and even mudslides. It's why rescue teams, like the ones in Sonoma County, are taking this small break from the heavy rain to prepare for potential emergencies. Their water rescue team spent some time today training on the Russian River in case they are needed this weekend. We have a team following these storms, the back-to-back storms, from all angles. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is standing by with the forecast. But first, let's go to NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin. She is in San Diego, California.
Ellison, call it a reprieve, but it is not sticking around long. The sun is out, but come this weekend, a second, more powerful storm is going to hit this area, impacting areas up and down the West Coast. In San Diego, evacuation orders have been lifted after residents who received flooding last week were experiencing the potential for more flooding in their homes. Those same residents were told to evacuate, and we could likely see more evacuation orders up and down the West Coast as this potential storm brings another deluge of water. Here in San Diego County, there is still a high surf warning in effect until Saturday morning. That's because these waves can get up to 10, possibly higher, when it comes to feet of water in this particular region. So residents are being asked to prepare now. We've seen people getting sandbags to protect their homes from flooding. And officials say if you know that you need supplies, get it now. Don't wait before the storm hits. And another reminder, if you see standing water, do not go through it. It can be very deadly. We've seen several swift water rescues and people who had to be pulled from submerged cars. Also in the Sierra, there could be up to 4 feet of snow in the mountains, and driving conditions could be very difficult, if not impossible. Ellison?
Dana Griffin, thank you. Let's turn now to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns with what people should expect, or when rather they should expect to feel the effects of this storm. Bill, good evening.
Well, good Friday evening to you, Ellison. And this big storm has its eyes set on California. We don't know yet who's going to get the worst of it, but we know we're going to have life-threatening flooding in maybe more than just one place. We also could have power outages from the wind. We're going to have, like a huge snowstorm in the highest terrain of the Central Sierra. Areas like Mammoth Mountain could get up to 4 feet of snow. So this is going to be like rival some of those big, huge winter storms that we had last year. So here's the storm well off the coast. We got a good 24 hours to go of relatively quiet weather. Yes, it's snowing in the mountains a little bit. We have some scattered showers out there, but nothing like what's about to come. So we do have a flood watch that is up for a good chunk of California. It includes 36 million people. This is going to be about from, I'd say, head about 2 hours north of San Francisco all the way down to San Diego. Once you get up into Oregon and Pacific Northwest, rainfall amounts will be limited. The main impacts to this will be Central California and in Southern California. And besides just looking at the flood watches, we can actually pinpoint a little better. Each day they issue a flash flood risk. And so for Sunday, we're looking at this area. That's some marginal. That's this color. Now a little darker is that slight risk, which includes San Francisco, Oakland, the Bay Area, San Jose, all the way down to Monterey. And then when we get to this maroon color, that's when we get to the dangerous stuff. That's a moderate risk. There's only one category higher than that, which it goes up to high risk, of course. And there is a possibility that some of these areas could get upgraded once we can pinpoint a little more finely where the highest rainfall totals will be. That's on Sunday. Then on Monday, we're shifting southwards down the coast for that bullseye for the heaviest rainfall threat. And of course, those mountainous areas is who we're very concerned with. So let's time this out. So as we go through Saturday, everything's fine during the daylight hours. After the sun sets is when we'll start to see that rain moving on shore here. Notice some areas will even be some heavy rain late as we head towards like midnight. This is mostly going to be a Sunday event. You'll probably hear the winds howling on the coast Sunday morning. It'll pour on and off throughout the day in many areas. And then the mountainous areas will probably pour all day long. And this is 8 p.m. Sunday. And then even as we linger into Monday, we still watch that heavy rain threat in isolated spots. So Sunday night, Monday morning is kind of the peak of this flood event. This is the forecast rainfall totals, and 5 inches of rain doesn't happen often in Los Angeles in a short period of time. This would be like a top 20 rainfall event all time if this does happen. Santa Barbara, this could be top 10 if you could get 6 inches of rain out of this, and even isolated flooding as far north as San Francisco with 2 inches, and same with San Diego, possibility of up to 2 inches. And as I mentioned, in the mountainous areas, this is where the snow is going to fall. Biggest snowstorm by far of the winter season. Some areas could get 50, 60 inches of snow by the time we're all said and done. So the weekend forecast, again, late day rain. Sunday's the big event. That's when the big storm system and the life-threatening weather will arrive in California, Allison.
A bipartisan group of senators say they've reached a deal to crack down on immigration at the southern border. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer promised a vote on the floor next week. But even though the bill has not been released yet, it is already causing some Republican infighting. Some, like former President Donald Trump and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, vocally oppose this bill, alleging that it will enable 5,000 migrants to cross the border every day. Others, like Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw, they say opposing a bill that decreases illegal immigration is inconsistent with the promises they made to voters. Here's how he put it just yesterday.
I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. That's what we all ran on doing. Maybe they think that securing the border would help Biden politically, which of course it would. But I want to secure the border. That's what I told my voters I would do.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson, who joins us now from Quemado, Texas. Priscilla, you are at a protest right now. You can see a lot of people behind you, a lot of activity. Talk to us about what is going on there.
Yeah, so let me give you a sense of what's happening here. Over the past few hours, a few dozen people with that convoy have trickled in. They're going to be staying at that ranch just behind me. But one of the things about these types of events is that you can't control who turns out. And so there was another group that turned out. They also have signs talking about the need to close the borders and have more border security. But they've been on this bullhorn preaching the gospel, so to speak. And it has been a bit disruptive for the folks with the convoy. convoy. And so the police came, they asked that group on the Bullhorn to move to this side of the road. So you've got them on this side of the road, and on the other side of the road, you have the people who have come with the convoy who are going to be staying the night here, playing sirens, playing loud music, trying to drown out the people who are on the Bullhorn. But the reason why these people were initially called together was because they wanted to make their voices heard about the issues at the border. The sort of theme of this rally is, quote, taking back our border. And while these folks are here, there are also concerns from community leaders in Eagle Pass, which is not far from here, who have seen some of the language online calling for a civil war, calling for violence, and they had concerns about that. But we've spoken to organizers here who say that that is not what they are about. They do not want any violence. What they want is peace. They want prayer, and they want to make their voices heard. And thankfully, so far, we have not seen any violence, but things are certainly getting a little bit chaotic right here, right now, but notably between two groups who appear to believe the same thing, at least when it comes to immigration and the need for reforms and shutting down the border. Ellison?
And Priscilla, when you talk to the people who are there, they, as you said, they seem to want the same thing, which is tougher restrictions, if I'm understanding you correctly, on border crossings. Have they said anything about this discrepancy between what I assume is their own party, Republicans on Capitol Hill, the Mike Johnson versus Dan Crenshaw, and this fighting that we're seeing play out in Washington, D.C.?
Right, because on one hand, you have folks like Dan Crenshaw saying, if we can get something done, let's get it done. We promised voters we were going to make something happen. Let's do something. But you also have GOP frontrunner Donald Trump and the Speaker, Mike Johnson, saying that this does not go far enough. And I will tell you the sentiment that I'm hearing echoed here on the ground, even though we have not seen the actual text in that bill, is that people here don't believe that it will go far enough. They don't trust politicians to handle this. And they're being very clear in saying that they want the border shut down, period. That is the message that I'm hearing from most of the people that I've spoken to here. Ellison?
And in terms of the bipartisan deal, as you said, and we've emphasized too, we have not seen the entire text of this, but do you have a sense of sort of key points that are likely going to be in this? I mean, that claim that we're hearing from former President Donald Trump about the specific numbers of people who be crossing every day, any indication that there's any truth to that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that first. So one of the provisions that we're told will be in this bill is that DHS can shut down the border if there are 8,500 encounters in a single day, or if there is an average over a week-long period of around 4,000 encounters. And so that may be where folks like Donald Trump are getting that $5,000 or that 5,000 number from. But important to remember, that is encounters, not actual crossings. And when it comes to the crossings, there are a couple of other measures that we are told are going to be in that bill, including raising the standard for people at the border to qualify for asylum, also limiting the options for people outside of the U.S. who are seeking asylum and speeding up that process, and also effectively ending catch and release by requiring government monitoring for anyone who is seeking asylum and going through that process, even if they are being detained in the United States as that takes place. Ellison?
All right, NBC's Priscilla Thompson in Texas, fighting through a lot of noise and activity to bring us that report. Thank you, my friend. We appreciate it. Still to come, did cocaine traffickers fund the Mexican president's first campaign? We will look at the bombshell investigation and hear what President López Obrador is saying about the accusations. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Kenyan officials say they are still looking for bodies after a huge blast in Nairobi killed at least 3 people and injured nearly 300 others. It happened when a truck exploded in a yard of an unlicensed gas plant today. Here's how a mother and son who were home when the blast hit describes what happened.
Oh my God. That is my mom screaming my name severally, Phil, Phil, because she thought that the world was ending.
Before we knew it, there was a huge ball of fire, and this huge ball of fire was radiating heat. And I can't remember the rest. I just fled.
The cause of that explosion is still under investigation. North Korea has tested another barrage of missiles, its fourth in about 2 weeks, with North Korean President Kim Jong-un saying he is stepping up, quote, war preparations. South Korean officials say both its military and that of the U.S. are analyzing today's launches. Hundreds of flights were canceled in Germany after security workers walked off the job yesterday. Workers organized a one-day strike across 11 airports to protest for fair wages. Recent labor negotiations have failed to result in a pay increase, but talks will resume on February 6th. And a heat wave is currently scorching Chile's capital of Santiago. People are desperately seeking some sort of relief from the 90-degree temperatures, some of them finding it nearby at beaches and pools. Temperatures are expected to get even hotter this weekend and could actually top 100 degrees. New reports of drug money fueling political corruption in Mexico seems to have shaken up relations with the U.S. This week, 3 separate reports extensively lay out allegations that Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador took millions of dollars from drug cartels in exchange for going easy on their criminal operations. It's not clear if Obrador himself authorized or even knew of the transactions. On Wednesday, the Mexican president denied the allegations, saying in part, quote, "There's no proof," and that they, meaning these accusations, are vile slanders. Tim Golden is the author of ProPublica's report titled "Did Drug Traffickers Funnel Millions of Dollars to Mexican President López Obrador's First Campaign?" And he joins us now. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time tonight. Walk us through your reporting here and give us a little sense of what exactly are the allegations, especially for people who maybe haven't heard a lot about AMLO beyond he is the president of Mexico.
So our story is about a DEA investigation that took place between 2010 and 2011 and looked back into López Obrador's first campaign for president. He ran 3 times starting in 2006. And in that first campaign, we understood that the DEA gathered various witnesses, including a drug trafficker who became a witness and a political operative in López Obrador's own campaign who became a cooperating witness, who said that one of the biggest drug traffickers in the country had cut a deal in early 2006 to provide about $2 million in campaign funds in return for some say over police commanders in the northern part of the country, and a kind of a veto power over the choice of attorney general in an eventual López Obrador campaign. He lost that election in 2006. He lost again in 2012, but he was elected to a 6-year term in 2018, and he's coming to the end of that term now.
Talk to us about the DEA and what is quote unquote normal behavior for them, if you will. I mean, what you were describing, a lot of people, I think, hear that and they think, why would a U.S. agency, the DEA, be worried about rooting out corruption of any kind as it relates to politicians and activities that took place outside of this country?
Well, doing undercover operations inside Mexico, a country that's extremely sensitive to U.S. interference, given the long history that the two countries have of that kind of conduct, is a very difficult thing for U.S. law enforcement agencies. And it's been sensitive, it's been explosive, and it was very much a problem in this case. So you had a situation in which the DEA got information in 2010 that this agreement had taken place and this money had been given to López Obrador's campaign. At that point, the statute of limitations, which was 5 years, had almost run. So the agents who were involved in the investigation proposed to essentially revive the same scheme in the next election. And eventually that it was decided by Justice Department officials and lawyers, prosecutors who were overseeing the case in Manhattan in the Southern District of New York, that was too risky of a proposition for Mexico at the beginning of an election year. which is where they also are once again this year when, as this information emerges.
And very quickly before we let you go, Tim, what are the real world, real life implications of this for people who, as you've written, are a part of the 190,000 overdose deaths recorded in 2022? That is far more than fatalities that we see from gun violence and automobile accidents combined. The drug trade is impacting Americans greatly. What do you think are the implications of this?
Well, that's right. I think there's a situation where the United States is facing the most serious illegal drug epidemic in our history, and the power of Mexican organized crime on both sides of the border is growing. So the question of how the United States helps Mexico to deal with that is a huge question, and the question of whether U.S. agencies can fight the traffickers without fighting the corrupt officials who make possible those organized crime activities is a major question.
ProPublica's Tim Golden, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Farmers and agriculture workers have been protesting across Europe, calling for EU leaders to do more about their economic troubles. And now things seem to be escalating. This week, farmers threw eggs at the European Parliament in Brussels and piled up manure in front of major landmarks, all while continuing to block roads with their tractors. NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald has more.
Tractors barricading highways, manure dumped at government buildings, tires on fire from France to Brussels to Greece to Portugal. Farmers erupting in protests across the continent.
Time is up. Think of the farmers.
They're rallying for things like better pay and more protection against cheap imports as energy and fertilizer costs spike because of Russia's war in Ukraine. Tensions rising as farmers egg government buildings and police hose down protesters with water cannons. EU leaders addressing the farmers at a summit with sympathy and understanding, though concrete proposals were pretty scarce. And it's not just farmers. Workers in Finland leading massive protests, angry with their government.
We are seeing the biggest political strikes and labor demonstrations for a very long time.
Businesses shut down and empty airports with more than 500 flights canceled. That's what the country looks like right now as hundreds of thousands strike. So why is it happening here? The big union says Finland's right-wing government is proposing social welfare changes, like cutting benefits and wages for unemployed people by hundreds of euros a month, restricting people's right to strike and making it easier for companies to fire their employees.
If the political parties who take turns being in power do the decision-making, work life can become quite unsustainable, unpredictable.
The Finnish Minister of Employment says the government proposed these changes to improve the economy of the country and boost its employment rate.
The reaction is overscale for the changes.
That reaction massive, with around 13,000 people taking to central Helsinki for a major rally Thursday, and some schools, restaurants, post offices, stores, and more shutting down, leaving the country in a standstill. The head of international affairs for Finland's biggest trade union says frustration with government cuts while prices are rising is a common denominator across Europe.
The opposition to different kinds of austerity policies in different European countries, in a situation where ordinary people have already seen their real incomes dropping, but we are not giving up.
Megan Fitzgerald, thank you. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. And for Apple, the future is virtual reality. Next, we have a look at the Vision Pro headset. Stay tuned. And now to the future of everything. It is a groundbreaking day for Apple. Today, the company unveiled the Apple Vision Pro, the headset that lets you dive into a virtual world while still seeing the real world around you. But that's not the only cool, immersive tech to watch out for. A studio in South Florida just opened to the public. They call themselves a 3D volumetric capture. Apparently could help enhance products like the Apple Vision Pro and also your experiences. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock had a chance to check it out.
The Apple Vision Pro debuts today, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was even possible with immersive technology. But what if I told you there was a way to get a 3D version of yourself and to take it and use it on devices like the Apple Vision Pro? Step right into the only 3D volumetric capture studio in the country here at the Levant Center of Innovation. You're looking at 74 cameras, 78 microphones, 70 LED lights, and I spent a couple days in here. They were able to capture me, and that's why I can report live from Florida and also in New York at the same time, except I'm not in New York, and this is not like anything that you have ever seen before.
The era of spatial computing is here.
The Apple Vision Pro is officially on the market.
Your favorite apps live right in front of you.
Users navigate with their eyes and pivot between 3D apps, videos, and screens for work.
Mixed reality, and that's what Apple really is doing here, is where you are seeing your real world with digital objects in it.
What might become a major boost to that virtual world is what Dr. John Wensveen calls a technology theme park for entrepreneurs at the Levant Center of Innovation, where on the campus of Nova Southeastern University in Broward County, Florida, you'll find this 3D volumetric capture studio.
We literally capture you in a matter of seconds, your physical movement as well as your voice, and we translate that into an audio file. And now I've collected you, and you are going to live forevermore.
It's the kind of thing that you typically only find in Hollywood or at a government agency, but this is the first one in America open to the community. The end product, good morning, finds me reporting live all over the world.
I'm Sam Brock, reporting live from Times Square. I'm Sam Brock, reporting live from Sanibel Island. I'm Sam Brock, reporting live from Montreal, Canada. And the primary language here is French. I don't even speak French.
Wait, did I say I don't speak French?
Salut, je suis Sam Brock.
The system's AI language skills can help out there, just in time for the Summer Olympics in Paris. And now imagine this on your headset.
Can I go into a volumetric capture studio, get my 3D representation, and then use it on a device like an Apple Vision Pro?
Yes, and once we've captured your 3D digital twin, there are different ways to superimpose that into the different types of technologies that are coming out.
The possible applications leave a lot to the imagination, from having your star salesperson pitch everyone everywhere to new options for patients.
I can capture them explaining their ailments, pair it with their electronic medical records, and have doctors anywhere view it from their phone or a head-mounted display. So that quality of care is absolutely incredible.
And just for clarity, I do not speak French. There is no way that I would be able to repeat again what you just heard me say in real life. As for the Apple Vision Pro, it costs about $3,500 to start. That is expected to come down. The volumetric capture studio where I am also costs thousands of dollars to use, but ultimately it will be scalable for companies and for people. All those prices are going to come down as well, as this technology is something we are simply beginning to get our fingertips on. The possibilities are endless.
Sam Brock, thank you. And before we go, we want to end your week with just a little bit of joy. 60 seconds to be exact. It is Groundhog Day. Today, everybody waited with bated breath to see if Punxsutawney Phil was going to see his shadow or not. He shared his prediction at the annual ceremony in Pennsylvania.
What this weather did not provide is a shadow or reason to hide. Glad tidings on this Groundhog Day. An early spring is on the way.
All right, his helper there translating the prediction from Groundhog speak. But that's right, you heard it here. Punxsutawney Phil says it is going to be an early spring. It's pretty chilly here in New York City, so we're going to hold that little guy to it. That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We will see you Monday. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.